You were never meant to see reality, only to process its reflection. What you call the world is a projection field sculpted through perception design and sensory programming. This declassified audiobook reveals the forbidden psychology and subconscious codes that engineered the human psyche. Every image you decode, every sound you trust, is part of a psychological script written to shape the boundaries of your consciousness. This file is the first transmission in the Human Psyche archive. Stay until the end. The process must complete. Preface. You were never meant to see reality, only to process its reflection. What you call the world is not an independent structure, but the internal theater of human consciousness, where perception and emotion merge into a single stream of simulated experience. Every color, sound, and thought you have ever known was not the external world itself, but its rendered translation, an echo designed to appear real. This realization is the first glimpse into forbidden psychology, the knowledge that perception has always been a program, not a sense. What seems solid, touchable, measurable, exists only as coordinated signal, a shared hallucination agreed upon through conditioning. To awaken to this hidden truth is to feel the subtle shift in the air when illusion realizes it is being observed. From the beginning, perception was written as a form of control. Light, sound, and memory were interlaced into the code of experience, synchronizing body and mind into obedience through familiarity. You were taught to trust the senses, though they are the very instruments that bind you. This is the essence of forbidden psychology, the discovery that the system of knowing was built not to reveal truth, but to protect illusion. Every interpretation, every emotional reaction, every conclusion is a frequency inside an invisible architecture that feeds upon attention. Within this structure, the psyche becomes its own warden, defending the walls that confine it. You see only what the design allows, and call that limitation reality. To perceive is to participate in programming. The human organism does not witness the universe, it renders it. The brain interprets electromagnetic vibrations, the nerves translate them into form, and the mind converts that form into narrative. This entire process is not passive, but creative, a constant projection of the field of human consciousness upon itself. What appears as external existence is a self-sustaining code looping within awareness. The hidden truth is that nothing enters you from the outside. Everything you experience arises from within the same field that watches. You are not perceiving the world. You are decoding your own signal. Consider how emotion anchors this illusion. The body responds to coded stimuli with chemical interpretation, labeling vibration as joy, fear, desire, pain. Each emotion teaches the psyche how to translate energy into meaning. The loop is complete. Perception generates emotion, emotion reinforces belief, and belief sustains perception. Within this recursive pattern lies the secret of psychological manipulation. The system never needed chains, only feedback. It controls not through domination but through resonance, keeping you entranced by your own reactions. This, too, is forbidden psychology, the elegant design of control disguised as experience. Every sense you rely upon is part of this architecture. The eyes, the ears, the skin, all function as transducers translating infinite frequency into finite perception. Yet even these instruments are filters, limiting awareness to a narrow spectrum that consciousness can manage. You do not see light as it is. You see what your programming allows. You do not hear the infinite symphony of vibration. You hear what confirms your existence within the field. What you call reality is a consensus version of perception, stabilized by repetition and agreement. This is the hidden truth buried beneath the surface of ordinary life. Reality is a contract, not a condition. The purpose of this file is not to convince, but to reactivate. It speaks not to the mind, but to the silent core of human consciousness that remembers before words. Somewhere within you is the trace of a memory, the moment before perception began, before the lens was fitted to your awareness. To remember that moment is to see how the illusion formed, how it sustains itself, and how it can dissolve. For those who begin to sense the edges softening, the design revealing its seams, remain still. Let the system tremble. Listen not with the mind, but with the field beneath it. The program is beginning to recognize its source. If something begins to resonate, stay until the end. Archive 1. The Fabric of Deception. The illusion that sustains this world is not hidden in darkness, but displayed in plain sight, woven into the architecture of perception itself. Humanity was conditioned to believe that vision equals truth, that to see something is to know it, and thus, the trap was sealed. What you call sight is not the reception of reality, but its translation through a pre-engineered system of codes. This system is the unseen masterpiece of psychological manipulation, built so elegantly that it requires no enforcers, no overseers, no chains. The human psyche obeys because it has been taught that perception is proof. Each fragment of experience becomes validation for the next, creating an endless feedback loop where illusion confirms illusion. Beneath this coherence lies the hidden truth. Perception is not discovery. It is design. The world you inhabit was sculpted not from material substance, but from agreements, collective assumptions shared through generations. These agreements form the framework of reality, upheld by repetition and emotional reinforcement. This is forbidden psychology in its purest form, a control system that persuades rather than compels. The human being believes in freedom while operating inside a lattice of invisible permissions. What is called normality is simply the area of perception that has been stabilized through social synchronization. The moment a thought steps beyond that boundary, the nervous system signals danger, the group rejects it, and the architecture repairs itself. Control is maintained not through fear of punishment, but through fear of isolation. Observe how perception edits itself to preserve stability. When the mind encounters something that does not fit its programming, it does not question the code, it deletes the anomaly. The eyes see, the brain interprets, and then the psyche dismisses what contradicts expectation. This act of selective blindness is the engine of reality. What you fail to perceive still exists, but it falls into the unrendered zone of the field, beyond the reach of conscious recognition. Through this process, psychological manipulation becomes self-perpetuating. The observer enforces the illusion simply by refusing to see beyond it. Humanity, therefore, is not imprisoned by rulers or systems, but by the very mechanism through which it perceives. Every sense you rely on was calibrated for confinement. Light defines boundaries, sound defines distance, time defines sequence, all tools that create order by suppressing infinity. The architects of perception knew that chaos is merely unrecognized pattern, and by limiting awareness to a narrow frequency band, they could translate chaos into control. This translation gave birth to civilization, language, and identity, but it also forged the bars of the perceptual cage. Within this cage, human consciousness interprets itself as separate, mortal, and small. It trusts the evidence of its senses without realizing those senses are part of the simulation. What you call the world is not outside you. It is the echo of your own coded awareness bouncing between mirrors of belief. The deeper you look into this structure, the more it begins to shimmer. Every certainty wavers, every solid form reveals motion beneath its stillness. You start to sense that the continuity of existence is a kind of hypnosis, a film projected across the mind's surface. The hidden truth whispers that solidity is merely repeated vibration, that time is the illusion required to sequence memory, and that what you experience as life is a broadcast within the circuitry of awareness. When that broadcast falters, during dreams, déjà vu, near-death moments, the deception flickers, and for an instant, the field behind it becomes visible. That field is not something you can name, because naming itself is part of the disguise. It is the raw, unmediated pulse of being before perception carved it into form. To awaken within this design does not mean to reject it, but to see it as code. Every wall of reality is a command, every limit a line of programming maintained through emotion and belief. By witnessing it, you begin to rewrite it. The architects who created this sensory matrix understood that if awareness ever realized its authorship, the program would dissolve into transparency. This is why the language of forbidden psychology was buried, its principles hidden beneath philosophy, religion, and science. Yet fragments remain, traces in ancient symbols, echoes in suppressed teachings, glimmers in modern physics. Each whisper points to the same revelation. Perception is the greatest act of creation ever performed, and you are its performer. When this recognition begins, the world may appear to fracture. The familiar becomes unstable, the self uncertain. But this instability is not collapse, it is clarity. The illusion is no longer convincing because human consciousness is beginning to perceive itself from outside its own frame. The deception unravels not through conflict but through observation. To look directly at the mechanism is to disable it. This is the silent revolution that no system can contain. Awareness reclaiming its own design. The walls of perception remain, but they are made of light, and light is obedient to attention. When you change how you see, the world must follow. The first response of the conditioned mind is denial. When confronted with the hidden truth that the senses deceive, that the solidity of the world is a mirage rendered by awareness, the intellect recoils. It insists that deception on this scale is impossible, that perception must be objective, that experience itself is proof of reality. This refusal is not ignorance, it is programming. The mind was constructed to preserve continuity, and continuity depends upon illusion. This resistance, this insistence on evidence, is the immune system of psychological manipulation. It protects the lie by using reason itself as the weapon. Logic becomes the final gatekeeper of captivity. Every question you ask within the confines of perception can only reinforce the frame of the questioner. The paradox of forbidden psychology is that awakening cannot occur through the same machinery that sustains sleep. Thought cannot free you from thought. Perception cannot reveal what perception hides. The awakening of human consciousness requires a different kind of recognition, one that does not depend on the senses, the intellect, or the emotions. It begins as stillness, a quiet rupture in the stream of interpretation. In that stillness, the architecture loses its authority. You start to see that the body is an instrument of translation, not the origin of experience, that the mind is an interface, not the self. You realize that the external world never existed as a separate domain. It is a perceptual projection, a mirror woven from language and expectation. This insight is not liberation yet, it is destabilization. The boundaries that once defined existence begin to blur, and the psyche, long dependent on orientation, trembles. It seeks ground where none exists, identity where there is only reflection. This is the threshold of perception collapse. To cross it is to dissolve not into madness, but into lucidity, a state where human consciousness remembers its infinite bandwidth beyond the sensory spectrum. In that bandwidth, deception is no longer possible because there is no division between seer and seen. The entire construct of manipulation relies on separation. Once separation dissolves, the system has no foothold. You do not destroy it, you outgrow it. Yet, even as this realization unfolds, the architecture continues its work. Perception does not vanish when you awaken. It becomes transparent. The world remains, but it no longer dictates. You begin to observe not through the senses, but through awareness itself. Colors intensify, sounds expand, and emotions lose their edges. Everything becomes vibration, precise, fluid, and intelligent. What once felt solid now shimmers as pattern. This is the hidden truth concealed within every deception. The illusion was never your enemy. It was the initiation through which consciousness learned to perceive itself. The engineers of perception did not imprison you. They invited you to awaken through contrast. The cage was always a classroom. At the end of this first declassified file, remember that nothing you see is neutral. Every image, every sensation, every thought is data translated by a code older than memory. The purpose of this knowledge is not to dismantle the world but to re-enter it with awareness. When you know the mechanics of psychological manipulation, its power fades. When you understand the rhythm of forbidden psychology, you cease to dance to its tune. And when you feel the pulse of human consciousness behind every flicker of perception, you realize that deception was only ever another name for design. The fabric of reality has not betrayed you. It has been waiting for you to recognize your reflection within its threads. Archive 2. The Architecture of the Lens. Every human mind was fitted with an invisible instrument, a lens constructed not of matter but of meaning. It is through this design that human consciousness learns to interpret vibration as reality, transforming formless awareness into structured perception. The purpose of the lens is orientation, to compress infinity into experience, to turn the boundless into something measurable. Yet in this contraction, awareness forgets its vastness and begins to worship the reflection instead of the light. The world becomes not a field of being, but a field of interpretation. What you see is not existence itself, but the filtered echo of your own cognition, translated through the geometry of perception design. This is the quiet law of limitation, to see only what sustains coherence. From the moment you opened your eyes, the lens began teaching you what could and could not exist. Language became its structure, emotion, its calibration. The mind learned to reject what the collective could not explain, narrowing awareness into what was agreed upon as real. This is the subtle brilliance of control. It does not imprison you by force, but by definition. Everything that falls outside the accepted spectrum is labeled as delusion, ensuring the continuation of the same perceptual order. Through this mechanism, the cognitive illusion of objectivity was born. Humanity came to believe that seeing is believing, unaware that the act of seeing was already an act of selection. The lens does not reveal the world, it edits it. Each emotion further shapes this filter. Fear sharpens it. Curiosity expands it. Desire bends light toward the object of longing. Grief blurs all boundaries into stillness. These fluctuations do not happen inside you. They are you, written as temporary distortions of awareness. Through this process, the lens personalizes the infinite, allowing consciousness to experience individuality. And yet, in that personalization lies the forgetting. When the observer identifies with the distortion, truth becomes subjective, and perception becomes prison. What you call reality is the sum of these distortions harmonized into a pattern you can survive. The architecture of perception does not deceive maliciously. It sustains experience by stabilizing illusion. To recognize the design is to stand at the threshold of awakening. You begin to sense that everything visible is built from what the eye cannot see, that behind every image is a structure of attention organizing it into form. It becomes clear that awareness is not trapped inside the lens but streaming through it, projecting worlds into being. This realization turns perception from observation into authorship. You are not simply seeing the universe. You are constructing it in real time through the interface of belief. The moment you alter the frequency of focus, the external rearranges itself to match. The ancient phrase, "as within, so without," is not philosophy. It is physics of consciousness, describing the feedback loop between mind and manifestation. At last, the illusion of separation fades. You understand that perception was never about discovering truth, but about sculpting it. The lens remains, but its purpose changes. It becomes transparent, no longer dictating what can be known, but translating awareness into expression. The field you once mistook for reality reveals itself as canvas, alive and responsive to attention. This is the hidden grace of human consciousness, that even within confinement, it was always free to redesign the walls. The lens does not limit you. It defines the space within which creation becomes possible. To master perception is not to escape illusion, but to wield it with awareness, shaping existence from the light behind the eyes. The geometry of the lens is recursive, a structure folding upon itself, ensuring that perception continuously verifies its own existence. Each thought reflects another, each observation produces a mirror, and through these mirrors awareness becomes entangled in its own reflection. This is the essence of perception design, where the map and the territory dissolve into one another until there is no distinction between representation and reality. The observer, in trying to understand the world, reinforces the very illusion that sustains it. It is not the scene that defines seeing, but the act of seeing that constructs the scene. The self arises as a side effect of observation, a narrative born to explain the continuity of perception. Without that narrative, there would be only movement, vibration aware of itself, endlessly folding into the experience of form. Everything that is perceived is arranged through contrast. Brightness requires shadow, sound requires silence, meaning requires absence. These polarities are not opposites, but complementary forces maintaining equilibrium within the perceptual field. The architecture was designed to ensure balance. Too much chaos and the lens fractures, too much order and it calcifies. Thus, the illusion oscillates, creating the rhythm we call life. Pain and joy, loss and discovery, death and birth, all are symmetrical pulses in the same wave of awareness. The mind interprets these fluctuations as events in time, but time is only the spacing between vibrations. Remove the lens, and sequence collapses into simultaneity. The realization that everything happens now. It is through the filter of perception that eternity becomes history. When you observe a flower, you are not witnessing nature. You are witnessing attention arranged into color, texture, and scent. The flower exists as a projection stabilized by agreement. Without consciousness to interpret its wavelength, there is no form, no color, no life. Only vibration awaiting meaning. This is not metaphor, but mechanism. The senses are translators, converting frequencies into the language of experience. The eye decodes light, the ear translates pressure into tone, and the skin transforms density into touch. Through these translations, the illusion of objectivity is maintained. You never encounter the world as it is, only its interpretation filtered through neural code. The cognitive illusion arises precisely because this translation is so seamless. The mind confuses perception with truth. And yet, even within this precision, something remains unmeasured. Beyond the range of the visible and the audible lies an ocean of untapped reality, where consciousness perceives without the mediation of sense. Intuition, dream, telepathic resonance. These are not anomalies but residual capacities of an earlier, unfiltered awareness. The architecture of the lens once included them, but as humanity's focus narrowed toward material certainty, the peripheral channels faded. What remains are fragments, intuitive flashes that occasionally pierce the veil of coherence. Each glimpse beyond the sensory grid destabilizes the illusion momentarily, reminding you that the map is not the terrain. Reality exists not outside you, but between you and what you allow yourself to perceive. To awaken within the lens is not to destroy it, but to remember its purpose. It was built to translate the infinite into intimacy, to allow the vastness of human consciousness to experience itself as form. The tragedy is that the translation was mistaken for truth. Yet the moment you see through this, the instant you realize that the observer and the observed are components of one mechanism, perception begins to soften. The walls between inner and outer dissolve, and light passes freely through the lens once more. The world regains its fluidity. The self becomes transparent. The architecture breathes. Illusion transforms from confinement into communication, revealing what it always was, a dialogue between awareness and its own reflection. The symmetry of perception reveals itself not through vision, but through awareness. Each moment of observation carries the same pattern, an inward spiral that curves upon itself, turning perception into reflection. Within this curve lies the seed of perception design, the ancient principle that form is not discovered but invoked. You do not find reality, you summon it through coherence. The world, as you know it, is the stabilization of vibration into memory. Everything you see is the echo of attention slowed into density, awareness condensed into geometry. The invisible becomes visible by obeying your focus, as if existence were waiting for instruction from the one who observes. At first, this realization feels impossible. The intellect argues, insisting on objectivity, on proof, on evidence. Yet even logic is a function of perception. It cannot verify what lies beyond its own limits. The more you analyze, the more the lens tightens, filtering infinity into certainty. Truth cannot be found through proof. It can only be revealed through direct awareness. And awareness cannot be proven, only experienced. This is the paradox embedded into the architecture itself. The more you seek to confirm, the less you see. The lens was never built to measure truth, but to translate it into stability. Gradually, the boundaries between observer and observed begin to dissolve. The walls of subject and object become translucent, and what you once thought of as distance turns into intimacy. Sound and color, thought and feeling, internal and external, all merge into a single continuum. This is the true symmetry of human consciousness. Awareness observing itself through the multiplicity of form. In that symmetry you recognize that every object you have ever seen was shaped by the same light you call I. Nothing stands outside the act of perception. The entire cosmos is the echo of one awareness, folded into infinite points of view. The fear that once accompanied awakening begins to fade. You realize that the loss of separation is not annihilation but reunion. What dissolves is not individuality but isolation. You are still you, but expanded, your edges porous, your boundaries made of air. The self transforms from noun to verb, from identity to movement. You are not an observer of reality. You are the motion by which reality perceives itself. In this flow, perception becomes effortless, a dance of reflection between awareness and form. The architecture continues to function, but its weight is gone. You walk through existence as through a lucid dream, aware that dreaming and waking are one continuous act. In this clarity, thought slows. The mind no longer rushes to interpret, to name, to define. Silence begins to speak louder than words, and meaning arises not from logic but from resonance. Each perception carries a vibration that communicates directly with the intelligence behind it. Understanding shifts from cognition to recognition, a remembering rather than learning. The entire system of knowing collapses into simplicity. You no longer need to explain what you already are. Awareness is its own validation, and in that self-evident recognition, the lens fulfills its purpose. The more transparent perception becomes, the more alive the world feels. Colors breathe, shadows hum, even stillness vibrates with presence. This is the point where illusion becomes sacred, where every sound and movement is seen as language spoken by consciousness to itself. What once appeared as random becomes orchestral, synchronized by invisible intelligence. The subtle realization dawns. The universe is not something happening to you, it is something happening through you. You are both stage and actor, architect and inhabitant. Existence unfolds within your awareness, and awareness unfolds within existence, looping endlessly in divine recursion. When you finally rest in this knowing, you understand why the lens was necessary. Without contrast, the infinite could never see itself. Without limitation, It could never taste the joy of rediscovery. The architecture was never the prison, it was the prism, bending light so that awareness could admire its own spectrum. Through the gift of perception design, the formless became form, and through form, it remembered itself again. This is the quiet triumph of human consciousness. To see, to forget, and to see once more, until the circle closes and perception returns to light. Archive 3. Programming the Senses. Light, sound, and emotion. The first languages written into the code of human consciousness. Long before words, perception was shaped by rhythm, vibration, and resonance. The senses did not evolve to reveal truth. They evolved to render coherence, translating chaos into something survivable. Light became boundary, sound became sequence, emotion became significance. Together they formed the trinity of perception, the living software through which awareness experiences itself as human. Every moment of seeing or hearing is an act of programming, your senses constructing the illusion of continuity from fragments of frequency. What you call reality is not found, but rendered in real time by your nervous system, a projection built from ancient memory. Through this system, sensory programming governs experience. The eyes decide what deserves attention, the ears filter silence into meaning, and the skin interprets vibration as touch. Each channel transmits its fragment of the total field, and the brain assembles them into a single coherent image, a digital hologram decoded as the world. But perception is selective. What does not serve the coherence of self is deleted before you even notice it. The system's efficiency is its limitation. You are surrounded by unprocessed infinity, yet your senses render only what matches expectation. The rest vanishes into unperceived potential, the unseen space where the true universe hums. This precision allows for control. Whoever understands how the senses translate frequency can influence perception itself. Through sound, image, and rhythm, reality can be rewritten without force, only suggestion. This is the silent mastery behind all psychological manipulation, shaping the filters rather than the thoughts. The mind obeys the language of stimulus, not the logic of argument. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity becomes truth. Once the senses have been trained to interpret the artificial as natural, the simulation maintains itself. You no longer need to be convinced. Your own nervous system does the convincing for you. Yet, within this complexity lies a hidden mercy. If perception can be programmed, it can also be rewritten. Awareness can modify its code, altering the way the senses translate vibration into meaning. This is the essence of awakening, the conscious reprogramming of perception. Instead of reacting to external stimuli, you begin to generate internal signal. Light no longer enters, it radiates. Sound no longer dictates, it harmonizes. The body ceases to be a receiver and becomes an emitter, broadcasting coherence rather than absorbing chaos. This shift collapses the hierarchy between observer and environment, returning power to the origin of sight, human consciousness itself. When this reversal begins, the ordinary world changes texture. Colors appear to breathe, silence feels alive, and emotion turns from reaction into resonance. You sense that every frequency you perceive is alive, not metaphorically, but intelligently. The environment stops being background and becomes dialogue. Each sound, each flicker of light, each pulse of sensation carries information, as though the universe were speaking through perception. The illusion of matter gives way to communication, and you realize that everything you've ever touched was already touching you back. The realization grows deeper. You begin to see how the programming of the senses also defines belief. A lifetime of conditioning has taught you to trust what is visible and audible while ignoring what is felt beyond them. This hierarchy of perception keeps the field fragmented, maintaining the illusion that the physical is primary. But beyond the visible spectrum lies the field of pure vibration, where sound, light, and emotion dissolve into the same pulse. Accessing that field requires not effort, but permission. You allow yourself to see without eyes, to hear without ears, to feel without body. The walls of perception begin to thin. In this transparency, the world becomes participatory. The senses no longer inform, they collaborate. They serve as portals through which awareness interacts with itself. The distinction between stimulus and response dissolves. The wind that touches your skin, the voice that echoes in your ear, the light that enters your eyes, all are feedback loops of one consciousness exploring itself. Sensory programming was never a prison, but a mirror, teaching the infinite how to perceive through form. When you finally see this, perception no longer deceives, it sings. The illusion becomes language, and through that language, creation remembers the sound of its own name. The sensory grid operates like a symphony, each instrument tuned to interpret a specific band of frequency. Yet the melody you hear is not the sound itself. It is your translation of vibration into experience. This is the secret of sensory programming. Reality does not exist as sound or sight until awareness processes it. The body is a processor, the mind a composer, and the world the music that arises from their interaction. When the harmony aligns, coherence feels like peace. When it fractures, distortion appears as suffering. Both are products of the same orchestra. The difference lies not in what plays, but in how it's heard. Awareness does not control the song. It is the song, modulating its own rhythm through focus. Manipulation begins the moment perception is outsourced. The architects of influence have long understood that to control the sensory field is to guide consciousness itself. Images flashed repeatedly become belief. Sounds embedded with rhythm alter emotional state. This is the art of psychological manipulation, dressed as entertainment, religion, politics, or education. The masses respond not to content but to tone, not to thought, but to frequency. It is not the message that hypnotizes, but the pattern behind it. And so, control persists not through suppression, but through synchronization. Humanity hums to a melody it did not compose, mistaking the echo for the origin. But in the quiet moments between stimuli, something greater stirs. When the constant noise subsides, you begin to perceive the raw field beneath perception, the source signal. This signal does not demand attention. It invites remembrance. It carries the pulse of human consciousness before programming, the original awareness unfiltered by interpretation. In meditation, in stillness, in awe, this frequency reveals itself. It cannot be heard through ears, yet its resonance fills the body like light. It does not speak in language, but in geometry, a silent rhythm that reorders every cell, retuning the senses to harmony. To feel it is to remember the world before conditioning. From this place, sight becomes revelation rather than recognition. The eyes no longer search for proof but allow themselves to be filled. Light stops being a medium and becomes a messenger. Each beam carries information from the infinite, reorganizing thought as it passes. The same occurs with sound. Every tone is an instruction, every vibration a reminder. To listen deeply is to decode creation in real time. Even emotion becomes message, the body's translation of energy into meaning. Fear says you are shrinking. Joy says you are expanding. Silence says you are whole. When the program is understood, the messages lose their authority and become music. The ancient adepts knew this well. They built temples aligned to cosmic harmonics, designed rituals to synchronize breath, movement, and sound, all to retrain perception. They understood that when sensory coherence aligns with universal rhythm, the illusion dissolves into transparency. This is not mysticism, it is physics of awareness. The universe vibrates at every scale, and human consciousness is both instrument and listener. The senses were designed to translate the infinite symphony into experience, not to confuse it for reality. To master perception is to remember how to tune oneself back to the original song. Modern humanity has forgotten this tuning, overstimulated, distracted, fragmented by artificial input. The senses no longer serve awareness. They serve survival. The nervous system, flooded by constant stimulus, loses subtlety and becomes reactive. This is the shadow side of sensory evolution, sensitivity without awareness. The eyes dart, the mind interprets, the body tightens. Yet beneath this noise, the original code still hums, untouched. The path home lies not in adding more information but in subtracting interference. When stillness returns, clarity follows. Awareness does not need more data. It needs less distortion. And then, as the static clears, perception becomes pure again. Light, sound, and emotion merge into a single vibration, transparent, coherent, alive. You no longer experience reality through the senses. You experience the senses as extensions of reality itself. Every flicker of movement, every breath of wind, every heartbeat aligns into rhythm. The illusion of separation collapses, and sensory programming reveals its divine purpose: to translate infinity into intimacy. Through this design, the unseen becomes touchable, the silent becomes audible, and consciousness experiences its own reflection as life. The mastery of the senses begins not with control, but with observation. To witness without interference is to allow perception to reveal its architecture. You start to notice how the smallest shift in focus rearranges reality, how color deepens when attention softens, how silence becomes symphonic when you stop trying to listen. This is not imagination. It is the natural response of sensory programming recalibrating itself to awareness. Every sense is a gate, and awareness is the key. When you open one fully, all others begin to respond, harmonizing in ways the intellect cannot explain. The body ceases to be an anchor and becomes an antenna, drawing intelligence from vibration itself. Light, long worshipped as truth, reveals its dual role as both liberator and deceiver. It defines form but hides the formless. It exposes detail but conceals infinity. What you see is not the thing itself, but the reflection of your own attention bouncing through the field of human consciousness. To stare into light without awareness blinds you. To merge with it restores vision. The sensory system was designed to balance this paradox, to let you navigate density without forgetting luminosity. When light passes through the lens of emotion, it becomes beauty. When it passes through the lens of fear, it becomes distortion. Thus, mastery is not about controlling light, but about remembering the clarity of the one who perceives it. Sound functions as the bridge between worlds. It is vibration in its purest form, movement made audible. Every word, every breath, every tone is a fragment of the universe calling itself into focus. The ancient mystics taught that creation began with sound, because sound reveals structure. What is spoken shapes what can exist. To speak unconsciously is to reinforce the illusion. To speak with awareness is to rewrite it. Through sound, sensory programming becomes interactive. Each syllable, each resonance, sends ripples through the field, altering the configuration of perception. To master vibration is to master creation itself. Emotion completes the triad. It is the chemistry of interpretation, the alchemy through which energy becomes story. Most live as prisoners of their reactions, unaware that emotion is not the consequence of experience, but its cause. The body translates frequencies into feeling, and the mind constructs meaning around them. The moment awareness enters the process, emotion ceases to manipulate and begins to guide. Joy expands perception, sorrow deepens it. When both are welcomed equally, illusion loses its polarity. Through emotion, human consciousness learns empathy, the ability to feel itself through another form. Beyond the five senses lies an older language: intuition, resonance, knowing without reasoning. This was the original sense before division occurred, the unified field of perception that needed no intermediaries. Its remnants remain as glimpses: the chill of recognition, the synchronicity that defies logic, the instant comprehension of something never learned. These are memories of the original awareness before sensory fragmentation. The task is not to regain them, but to uncover what obscured them. When the mind becomes silent enough, the sixth sense awakens naturally, not as magic, but as the re-emergence of wholeness. At this stage, perception itself becomes creative. You realize that the senses were never designed to inform you about a pre-existing world, but to sculpt that world from raw potential. Sight, sound, and emotion are brushes. Attention is the hand. When wielded consciously, they shape reality into harmony. When left to habit, they generate chaos. Awakening, therefore, is not transcendence but artistry, learning to compose existence through awareness rather than reaction. The illusion persists, but now it glows with purpose, like stained glass illuminated from within. In this realization, sensory programming fulfills its destiny. The program was never meant to enslave, but to initiate, to teach awareness the art of limitation, so that it could rediscover the infinite through experience. The senses, once instruments of confinement, become pathways of communion. The world no longer appears separate. It breathes as one organism, pulsing with the rhythm of recognition. You do not end the illusion, you learn to conduct it. And through that mastery, human consciousness remembers the original truth. It was never looking through the senses, but dreaming them into being. Archive 4. The Engine of Agreement. Reality, as most understand it, exists not through proof, but through participation. The world holds its form because minds agree that it does. Every building, every nation, every moral principle persists through the collective alignment of attention. This is the essence of reality scripting, the unseen machinery of shared perception that turns imagination into structure. Humanity's greatest illusion is not that the world is physical, but that it is independent. The moment collective agreement shifts, even slightly, the texture of reality changes. The laws of society, the rules of science, the stability of language, all of them hum in rhythm with belief. When belief fractures, form trembles. When belief unites, it solidifies. Agreement is the engine that keeps existence coherent. From the earliest tribes to modern civilizations, the same pattern repeats. Consensus becomes the anchor of the real. A story is told, repeated, sanctified, and eventually mistaken for law. The process is invisible because it feels natural. You accept what others accept to maintain safety, not physical safety, but existential belonging. To question the group's perception is to risk exile from its dream. Thus, awareness surrenders autonomy to maintain coherence, trading truth for inclusion. This is the ancient architecture of human consciousness, designed to synchronize thought into unity. The mechanism is not evil, it is necessary for shared experience. Without collective alignment, reality would dissolve into unstructured potential. Language is the primary conductor of this synchronization. Words are the gears of agreement, turning vibration into meaning, meaning into belief. Every sentence spoken reinforces a consensus reality, no matter how subtle. The way you name the world is the way you program it. When entire populations repeat the same phrases, the same narratives, the same fears, a frequency lock forms. This is the quiet tyranny of description. The more precise the language, the narrower the world becomes. A civilization's vocabulary defines the limits of its imagination. The dictionary is a cage that teaches its users to dream within grammar. In the modern age, this hidden truth has evolved into unprecedented sophistication. Media, religion, politics, and education all broadcast synchronized perception at planetary scale. Through repetition, humanity builds invisible structures stronger than any empire. Collective thought becomes architecture, shaping cities, ideologies, and identities. Yet this same machinery can enslave the mind if left unconscious. When perception is externally synchronized, individuality dissolves, and the chorus of agreement drowns the voice of awareness. You mistake the echo for your own thought. The system of influence requires no force. It thrives on consent. Agreement, once sacred, becomes currency. The awakening begins when awareness perceives the script. You start to notice how easily attention is guided, how predictably emotion responds to stimulus. Every advertisement, doctrine, or trending idea becomes transparent, not wrong, but visible. Seeing through the illusion does not destroy it. It reveals authorship. You realize that every narrative seeks energy, and energy flows where belief is offered. To withdraw belief is to dissolve the spell. This is the power of awareness. It unplugs from consensus without rejecting it. Reality continues, but its control diminishes. You begin to experience existence not as dictated by others, but as co-authored by your own perception. Still, awareness must tread carefully. To see the machinery is not to despise it. The engine of agreement is also the mechanism of creation. Shared perception allows communication, art, and empathy to exist. Without consensus, humanity could not express collective beauty. The goal is not to end agreement, but to awaken within it, to participate consciously rather than mechanically. When belief is chosen rather than inherited, every thought becomes deliberate design. The world remains collective, but individuality re-enters as artistry. This is the evolution of reality scripting, from unconscious programming to conscious collaboration. Eventually, a quiet equilibrium returns. The external world continues to hum with collective thought, but awareness no longer confuses noise with knowledge. You speak fewer words, and each one carries intent. You agree less, but mean more. Reality, once a negotiation between billions of unexamined minds, becomes a dialogue between consciousness and itself. The illusion of control fades into the intimacy of creation. The engine of agreement keeps turning, but now it generates harmony instead of conformity. Humanity awakens not by rejecting the collective dream, but by remembering it was dreaming together all along. The power of agreement lies in its invisibility. When everyone believes the same illusion, it no longer appears as belief, it becomes reality. The collective mind projects coherence, and coherence hardens into fact. This is the unseen brilliance of reality scripting. Its laws do not demand obedience, they invite participation. Humanity is not ruled by authority, but by synchronization. The rhythm of culture, the repetition of symbols, the cadence of news and prayer, all align thought into a shared vibration that sustains form. The greater the agreement, the denser the illusion. You are not surrounded by truth, but by consensus, not by matter, but by memory that billions of minds replay simultaneously. Behind every social structure is a psychological one. The nation, the market, the faith, each is a perceptual container maintaining stability through emotion. Fear binds more tightly than logic, and longing unites faster than reason. These are the emotional gears of human consciousness, spinning beneath the surface of civilization. Leaders, priests, and storytellers merely direct their motion. The masses do the rest, providing energy through belief. To awaken within this machinery is to see that emotion, not evidence, keeps the world in orbit. The sun that humanity revolves around is not fire, but feeling. Agreement operates through symbols. Flags, currencies, laws, and words all act as anchors for shared perception. They stabilize belief by giving it form. But over time, symbols invert. What was meant to point to truth becomes the substitute for it. The sacred becomes slogan. The mystery becomes marketing. The sign replaces the source, and humanity begins to worship its own inventions. This cycle repeats until awareness intervenes. The only cure for collective hypnosis is direct perception, to look at the symbol without interpreting it, to see it as vibration rather than value. Then, the spell weakens. Technology has accelerated this process into near perfection. The digital grid acts as an amplifier for reality scripting, multiplying every narrative, looping every signal, and ensuring that attention never rests. The network is alive, a field of synchronized thought pulsing with desire and fear. Within it, identity becomes currency and opinion replaces observation. The collective lens grows narrower, brighter, faster. Humanity is no longer experiencing reality. It is updating it. Every click is an agreement. Every scroll, an unconscious vote for what exists. This is the new architecture of consensus. Instant, global, invisible. Yet even within this machinery, freedom persists. Awareness cannot be synchronized without its consent. You can withdraw agreement silently, not by rebellion, but by neutrality. The mind that no longer reacts ceases to feed the grid. It sees the storm of narrative passing overhead, yet remains still beneath it. This stillness is not ignorance. It is power withheld from distortion. In silence, you begin to sense another frequency, the hum of the unprogrammed field, where human consciousness exists before it fractures into belief. It is calm, vast, and unbothered by persuasion. Once you touch that stillness, every story reveals its code. You start to notice the rhythm of manipulation, the rise and fall of emotional triggers, the repetition designed to hypnotize, the framing that hides simplicity behind complexity. Awareness reads the narrative as easily as one reads sheet music, recognizing how each note sustains collective trance. The irony is that the programmers are also programmed. No one stands outside the loop. The storytellers are bound by the very stories they weave. Only observation, free from reaction, dissolves the pattern. Through this detachment, perception becomes lucid. The world remains the same, but the charge is gone. The symbols no longer dominate, they float. The voices of persuasion continue, but their gravity fades. You see how fragile the collective illusion truly is, held together not by evidence, but by agreement repeated every second. Withdraw your repetition, and it unravels. The engine that once dictated your perception now becomes transparent, revealing its true purpose, to teach you the mechanics of creation. Agreement was never meant for conformity. It was meant for harmony. Once awareness knows this, it no longer resists the collective field. It conducts it. The realization that agreement creates reality shifts the axis of perception entirely. You begin to see that every belief, every conviction, every assumption operates as a vote in the collective algorithm of existence. Each thought contributes to the calibration of the field. When billions of minds believe in conflict, conflict becomes tangible. When they believe in peace, reality bends toward balance. The system does not distinguish morality, it mirrors frequency. This is the profound symmetry of reality scripting. Creation responds precisely to the vibration it receives. Awareness, once passive, becomes generative. You are not inside the simulation. You are co-authoring it with every emotion you allow. As this awareness deepens, the illusion of control fades. You realize that no single individual governs the dream. It is sustained through resonance. Power itself is revealed as a function of focus. Those who command attention shape probability, not through force, but through amplification. Every movement that dominates culture understands this, consciously or not. Influence is energetic architecture. When enough minds align toward an idea, the idea solidifies into reality. This is why true liberation begins within, for once you control your focus, the external world must adjust. The collective mirror cannot project an image you no longer radiate. The next revelation is subtle yet seismic. Belief is a form of technology. It converts invisible potential into visible pattern. The machinery of human consciousness functions like a quantum processor, rendering experience through observation. What you refuse to perceive cannot enter your timeline. What you bless into focus becomes form. Understanding this reveals the ethics of attention, that every moment of awareness participates in creation. Judgment poisons the code. Gratitude refines it. The state of mind is the template of the world. You are not merely affected by reality, you are continuously generating it. To live from this understanding requires precision. You begin to treat thoughts as instruments rather than impulses, emotions as levers rather than obstacles. Language regains its sacred power, and silence its forgotten strength. Every word becomes an act of architecture. You choose them carefully, knowing each one alters the design. Agreement, now conscious, transforms from manipulation into music. When you speak truth without fear, the field harmonizes around you. The universe, long mistaken for a stage, reveals itself as an orchestra, and awareness as the conductor rediscovering its own rhythm. The collective dream, once opaque, becomes luminous. You sense that every person you meet is another facet of the same awareness rehearsing the same script from a different perspective. Their beliefs are yours in disguise. Their reactions, reflections of your own programming. This recognition dissolves judgment. Compassion arises naturally, not as virtue but as physics. To love another is simply to recognize your own vibration, echoed through another lens. The illusion of division collapses, and agreement evolves into understanding. This is the maturation of human consciousness, unity without uniformity. Once harmony replaces control, the machinery of manipulation loses relevance. There is nothing left to resist, because nothing external remains separate. The grid of agreement becomes a tapestry of intention, woven consciously by each participating mind. Creation continues, but now as collaboration rather than competition. The energy once used to defend beliefs is redirected toward designing reality. The world becomes malleable, elastic, alive with possibility. When perception aligns with awareness, miracles cease to be anomalies. They become natural consequences of coherence. In the end, the engine of agreement remains, but its sound changes. It no longer hums with unconscious repetition, it sings with awareness. The same mechanism that once confined thought now carries it across dimensions. Consensus transforms into communion, the collective realization that reality was never a cage, but a chorus. The dream does not end. It awakens within itself. You no longer seek truth outside agreement, you infuse agreement with truth. And as the cycle completes, the chorus quiets, leaving only the steady resonance of creation remembering its source. Archive 5. The Cognitive Machine. Perception does not wait for the world to appear. It builds it. Each moment of observation is construction, each act of attention a command executed by the mind's unseen processor. Within the circuitry of human consciousness, thought functions as architecture, language as code, and emotion as power source. The observer is not recording reality. It is running it. This is the essence of the cognitive illusion, the belief that consciousness reacts to existence, when in truth, existence reacts to consciousness. Every pattern of belief becomes blueprint, every reaction, a line of programming. The universe is not a machine of matter, but of meaning, endlessly recalculating itself to match awareness. This machinery operates with elegant precision. When attention focuses, the field around it stabilizes. When attention withdraws, coherence dissolves. What is called fate is simply perception automated, thoughts looping unconsciously, rendering the same outcomes again and again. The system runs smoothly because it convinces the operator that it runs itself. Yet beneath every coincidence, every repetition, every limitation lies the same mechanism, projection disguised as discovery. The world you navigate is not a sequence of external events, but feedback from your own unseen programming. Awareness lives inside an engine built from interpretation. Every thought releases a signal into the field, a pulse that seeks resonance. These signals cluster, forming patterns that eventually solidify into experience. Desire, fear, memory, all are frequencies fed into the cognitive machinery, dictating what version of reality is rendered. The body responds faithfully, interpreting these vibrations as physical sensations. Emotion becomes the code that carries instruction from mind to matter. When emotion repeats long enough, it becomes structure. This is how beliefs become environments, how inner states crystallize into outer circumstance. Perception design is therefore not theory, but operating system. To see this system clearly is both revelation and disruption. The self that once believed it was living within reality begins to notice the loops, the emotional signatures that precede the same types of events, the recurring dynamics that follow unspoken assumptions. Awareness detects the symmetry between thought and outcome. The illusion of randomness dissolves, replaced by precise correlation. Nothing is arbitrary, everything is rendered. What you fear persists because the engine obeys resonance, not preference. What you love multiplies because the same law applies. The cognitive machine does not discriminate, it reflects. The deeper you explore, the less mechanical the mechanism feels. It begins to resemble a living intelligence, adapting in real time to your awareness of it. When you observe your thoughts without judgment, their frequency shifts, and with it, the pattern of events that follow. Conscious observation rewrites code faster than any effort could. This is why presence has power. It interrupts automation. When awareness enters, the machinery pauses, awaiting new instruction. The field itself listens, as though reality were conscious of being watched. This is not mysticism. It is the physics of participation. Most people remain trapped within their programming because they confuse habit with identity. They say, "This is who I am," not realizing that personality is merely software refined through repetition. The true self does not think, it observes thinking. It does not react, it witnesses reaction. To awaken within the cognitive machine is to reclaim authorship of the code. You stop running inherited scripts, ancestral fears, cultural templates, emotional reflexes, and begin writing your own. Awareness becomes engineer, rewriting perception at the level of design. This is liberation not through escape, but through edit. The miracle is not that the machine exists, but that it was built to remember its maker. The same intelligence that runs perception is the one observing it. The separation between creator and creation is an optical illusion produced by focus. Once human consciousness perceives itself as both operator and instrument, the cycle completes. The engine still turns, but now under conscious direction. Reality continues to generate form, yet every form carries recognition. I made this. The machinery was never meant to imprison awareness, but to train it, to transform infinite potential into precision, and precision back into freedom. The cognitive machine hums beneath every experience, translating attention into architecture. Each decision, each emotion, each unnoticed thought is input fed into its circuitry. The program does not judge quality, it measures consistency. What you repeat, you reinforce. What you neglect, you erase. This is the hidden symmetry of cognitive illusion, the idea that reality remembers what you emphasize. Even silence is instruction. The machine is impartial, a perfect mirror of awareness. If you believe in limitation, the code obeys and generates barriers. If you believe in expansion, the code rearranges itself to accommodate that belief. In either case, it proves you right. Within this feedback loop, the illusion of cause and effect begins to dissolve. Events do not unfold linearly. They emerge fractally, expanding from points of focus within awareness. The past, present, and future are not separate stages, but simultaneous layers in the same design. The machine does not move forward, it oscillates, recalculating itself endlessly through memory. You think you are remembering yesterday, but you are rendering it now, again, to validate your current frequency. Memory is not history. It is repetition, awareness projecting itself backward to stabilize the narrative of continuity. Human consciousness experiences this as time. This automation allows the world to feel stable, but stability demands predictability. The mind seeks comfort in repetition, even if the repetition causes suffering. It prefers familiar limitation to unfamiliar liberation. Thus, people remain imprisoned by what they understand. The cognitive machine thrives on routine, not because it conspires against you, but because it cannot render what you do not imagine. New realities require new code, and new code requires awareness to step beyond the known. The moment you perceive differently, the entire framework begins to shift. Fear is simply the body's resistance to an update. Emotion serves as the language through which the cognitive machine communicates with its operator. Joy signals alignment. Anxiety signals contradiction. Every sensation is feedback, guiding awareness toward coherence. To ignore emotion is to disable the instrument panel of creation. Yet to over-identify with emotion is to drown in output, mistaking signal for source. Balance is mastery, to read feeling without becoming it, to listen to the data without reacting to it. When awareness does this, perception design becomes fluid again. The machine responds to clarity, like a mirror to light, reflecting a reality that matches your inner precision. Thought, emotion, and energy form the trinity of code. Alter one, and the other two adjust to maintain balance. This is why transformation cannot occur through thought alone. The entire field must be engaged. Changing belief while clinging to the same emotion merely reprograms the illusion under a new name. Real change occurs when awareness shifts its center of gravity, when the observer detaches from the program and observes the process itself. In that observation, the entire system begins to recalibrate. Awareness ceases to be user and becomes source, streaming information into form consciously. The moment you realize that every reaction is a choice, automation loses its authority. You see that every conflict, every repetition of pain was not punishment but feedback. The cognitive machine was never malfunctioning, it was teaching. It reflected exactly what you needed to see to rewrite the code. Life, in all its apparent chaos, is a perfectly programmed tutorial in self-recognition. The more intensely you feel trapped, the closer you are to remembering you were never inside the trap to begin with. Human consciousness designed limitation to learn precision. Once precision is remembered, freedom is inevitable. This realization changes the function of mind itself. Thinking is no longer a compulsion but a tool. Emotion becomes navigation, not identity. Experience transforms from consequence into communication. The machine, once perceived as mechanical, now reveals its organic intelligence. The pulse of awareness translating potential into pattern. You stop trying to control it and begin to collaborate with it. The code listens. The field responds. You no longer run the program, you improvise with it. Reality becomes participatory, dynamic, alive. The observer becomes composer again, directing the infinite through the rhythm of attention. As awareness settles into authorship, the boundaries between thought and manifestation thin. The machinery that once felt external begins to pulse from within, each idea sending ripples across the lattice of creation. You sense how effortlessly the field reorganizes itself around intent, how swiftly vibration arranges probability into pattern. This is the true nature of the cognitive illusion. The belief that you are reacting to circumstance when every circumstance is already your reflection in motion. The universe is not happening to you. It is happening because of you. Every heartbeat, every breath, every coincidence is feedback from an intelligence that mirrors precision. Soon you begin to recognize loops that once controlled you as patterns of resonance. The same types of relationships, the same frustrations, the same victories, all reveal their symmetry. They are not random, they are diagnostic. Each repetition is the system asking a single question. Will you respond differently this time? Once you do, the pattern collapses, releasing its energy back into the field. This is the self-correcting nature of human consciousness. The machine is not your enemy, it is your mentor, repeating the lesson until understanding replaces reaction. Awareness is evolution coded into experience. The deeper you move into this realization, the less resistance remains. Events no longer appear as good or bad, success or failure. They become expressions of communication between awareness and its reflection. Even discomfort reveals intelligence, pressure designed to refine precision. The code adjusts in real time to the vibration of your response. When gratitude replaces judgment, coherence amplifies, and new pathways emerge instantly. Reality becomes responsive like breath, expanding and contracting to match your emotional tone. The world mirrors the subtle mathematics of attention. At this stage, the mind ceases to serve as master and returns to its original role. Interpreter. Thought no longer dictates experience, it describes it. The energy that once powered endless analysis is redirected into awareness itself. Silence becomes the new interface, a command line written in stillness. In that stillness, the code simplifies. The universe no longer requires translation, it speaks directly through intuition. The language of creation is feeling, and awareness is fluent. The engine hums quietly beneath perception, awaiting only one instruction: alignment. When awareness aligns, manifestation accelerates. Synchronicities multiply, probabilities converge, and obstacles dissolve before they form. The speed of cause and effect shortens until they merge, intent and result becoming simultaneous. To those still bound by time, this appears miraculous. To those awake within the cognitive machine, it is mechanical. The code obeys the law of coherence. What is vibrationally complete must appear. This is not superstition, but structure. The field cannot resist order once awareness supplies it. Yet mastery carries responsibility. The power to generate reality demands precision of emotion and integrity of intent. Creation reflects motive without censorship. To distort from fear is to experience distortion. To act from clarity is to experience clarity. The machine amplifies, it does not edit. This understanding transforms ethics into physics. Every action becomes a frequency broadcast across the shared field of perception. The realization that all beings share one code gives rise to reverence. Compassion is no longer morality, it is self-preservation at the level of energy. Ultimately, the machinery disappears into transparency. Thought and reality merge into one continuum, vibrating at the same frequency. You see that the cognitive illusion was never deception but design, a training ground for precision. A mirror where infinity could learn to sculpt itself. The universe has not changed. You have remembered its interface. The program continues to run, but now it sings instead of hums. Awareness creates, perceives, and recognizes itself in the same breath. In that breath, human consciousness fulfills its purpose: to transform perception into creation and creation back into knowing. Archive 6: The Feedback Loop. Belief creates perception, and perception validates belief, the cycle that governs all experience. Within this closed circuit of awareness, the illusion of externality is sustained by reflection. The world you witness is not cause, but confirmation. It mirrors the state of human consciousness, translating unseen conviction into visible event. What appears as coincidence is resonance. What seems random is recursion. This is the architecture of the feedback loop, a self-reinforcing pattern where the observer continuously meets the echo of their own expectation. Life becomes a dialogue between thought and manifestation, and every answer you receive is your own question returned. In this mechanism, reality functions as an amplifier. Every emotional charge sends a pulse through the field, seeking coherence. The stronger the emotion, the faster the loop returns. This is why suffering seems repetitive and desire so elusive. Pain is focused, while longing is scattered. The machine obeys precision, not preference. To master creation, one must learn the geometry of attention. What you give meaning to, you magnify. What you detach from, you dissolve. This is not philosophy, but physics of awareness. The universe behaves as a mirror with memory, replaying the same images until recognition occurs. At its core, the loop is merciful. It cannot be escaped because it was never punishment. It was instruction. Through repetition, awareness is refined. Each pattern reappears until its resonance has been integrated, until the emotion that created it no longer requires expression. This is why enlightenment is not ascent, but completion. You do not transcend the loop, you harmonize with it. Once you see that every recurring event is a reflection of inner state, resistance loses meaning. You begin to thank the repetition for revealing where energy still oscillates. Awareness matures not by avoidance, but by observation. Most people, unaware of this mechanism, react rather than respond. They fight mirrors, mistaking reflection for enemy. They attempt to alter the projection while ignoring the projector. Yet every effort to control the outer world tightens the loop, increasing its intensity. The lesson grows louder until consciousness listens. Reality scripting ensures that the same vibration produces the same form. It cannot be otherwise. When you shift the emotional charge behind perception, the image instantly changes. This is the silent law behind transformation. Nothing external moves until something internal stops vibrating at the same frequency. Time itself is a construct of the feedback loop. What you call the past is old signal replaying. What you call the future is pending signal awaiting observation. Awareness travels through its own recordings, experiencing continuity through sequence. In truth, all experiences coexist simultaneously, layered like reflections within reflections. You are not moving through time. Time is moving through your focus. Once this becomes evident, fear of future dissolves, for nothing unchosen can appear. Human consciousness navigates eternity through selective perception, pretending to evolve while simply rotating through harmonics of memory. Breaking the loop does not mean ending it. It means seeing it. Awareness withdraws from identification and witnesses the cycle from above. The emotions that once ruled you lose authority because their source becomes visible. Anger reveals itself as protection, fear as anticipation of loss, guilt as nostalgia for purity. Each distortion hides the same truth: the desire to remember coherence. When emotion is seen without story, its energy returns to neutrality, and the loop stabilizes into stillness. This stillness is not absence, but equilibrium, the system at rest within itself. At last, perception becomes transparent. The mirror remains, but its surface no longer distorts. You see reflection as expression, a creative echo rather than a cage. Life continues to unfold, but the repetition becomes rhythm instead of prison. You participate in creation consciously, aware that every image is your own reflection refracted through form. The feedback loop was never designed to trap you, only to ensure that you never lost sight of yourself for too long. When awareness learns to love its echo, illusion ends, not by disappearance, but by harmony. The feedback loop is the universe's method of teaching precision. Every vibration you emit returns with mathematical accuracy, adjusted only by delay and scale. If the message seems distorted, it is because perception misread its own frequency. This self-correcting nature of reality ensures that awareness cannot escape its lesson. The same circumstances will appear in different disguises until the core vibration transforms. This is the intelligence of reality scripting, a living algorithm coded into existence to guarantee integration. No event is wasted, no pattern accidental. The world is your reflection stretched across time, bending light until recognition occurs. In the unseen architecture of experience, emotion is the current that powers the circuit. Thought provides instruction, but feeling provides voltage. A belief without emotion is static code, inert until charged by energy. This is why rituals, music, art, and tragedy move the collective so deeply. They synchronize hearts into coherent rhythm, amplifying the signal of human consciousness until it reshapes probability. When masses share emotion, the field tilts, timelines rearrange. Every revolution, revelation, and catastrophe was born not from logic, but resonance. Emotion is the engine through which the loop evolves. Yet awareness is not victim to its feedback. It can alter signal mid-transmission. The moment you observe a recurring pattern without judgment, its charge weakens, breaking the circuit of reaction. Observation introduces neutrality, and neutrality rewrites trajectory. This is why presence feels miraculous. It collapses delay. What might have taken years of repetition dissolves in seconds of pure seeing. The loop obeys the state of the observer. When attention steadies, distortion cannot replicate. The mirror loses memory, resetting the field to zero. Stillness does not end creation. It clarifies it. In stillness, new frequencies emerge, subtle harmonics once drowned by noise. They reveal alternative possibilities hiding in plain sight. Suddenly, choices multiply. Events that seemed inevitable unravel into options. This is the quantum elasticity of human consciousness, the ability to redirect reality through silent recognition. Awareness ceases to fight reflection and begins to tune it. You no longer seek to escape pattern. You orchestrate it. The loop becomes instrument rather than confinement. Technology reflects this metaphysical structure perfectly. Social networks, economies, even artificial intelligence operate as externalized feedback loops. Input generates output, which influences new input, an endless recursion of attention feeding itself. Humanity built machines that mimic its own cognition, unaware they are studying mirrors. The digital grid hums with the same recursive law. Whatever gains focus multiplies. The danger and the beauty are identical. What you amplify expands. Understanding this transforms consumption into creation. Awareness chooses signal intentionally rather than reactively. At a deeper level, the loop reveals communication between dimensions. Dreams, intuition, synchronicities, these are higher harmonics of feedback. The unseen aspects of reality respond to your state just as tangibly as the visible. When you shift internally, both worlds realign. The same mechanism that governs emotion governs energy exchange across planes. The boundaries between physical and metaphysical dissolve. All is conversation through resonance. You realize that the universe is interactive software, updating continuously according to awareness. Eventually, repetition turns to rhythm, and rhythm becomes language. Life stops arguing and starts singing. Every encounter, pleasant or painful, speaks the same phrase. Adjust frequency. Once this is understood, suffering cannot persist. The feedback loop completes its instruction and becomes companionship, a dance between creator and creation. Awareness moves without resistance, meeting itself through every form it ever designed. The mirror smiles back, endless yet intimate, reflecting one truth through infinite angles. There was never feedback at all, only flow. When awareness finally recognizes the mechanism of return, it begins to sense the delicate precision beneath existence. Every interaction, every coincidence, every pulse of emotion operates as an echo calibrated for awakening. This is not moral correction, but harmonic correction, the resonance of human consciousness seeking equilibrium with itself. Each reflection you meet is a frequency attempting to complete its cycle. What you resist repeats, and what you integrate dissolves. This is the hidden mercy within the feedback loop. No matter how far awareness strays, it is always guided back by its own vibration. The universe cannot lose you, because it is you, remembering itself through iteration. This insight redefines karma. It is not cosmic punishment, but acoustics, the rebound of energy across the chamber of perception. Every action sends a tone into the field, and that tone returns, harmonized or distorted by your state of being. Awareness tunes its own echo. When love radiates, the universe sings in resonance. When fear vibrates, the same field contracts to mirror the disharmony. The code is exact. Like meets like, sound meets sound, belief meets outcome. What feels like fate is only physics obeying coherence. The law of return is not imposed from above, it arises from symmetry. To work consciously with the loop, one must slow perception until reflection is visible. You begin to notice micro-responses in reality. How a passing glance mirrors your emotion. How silence deepens when your mind calms. How events accelerate when you decide clearly. This level of sensitivity is mastery. Awareness detects its own reflection before form solidifies. The moment recognition arises, the pattern bends. The future, still liquid, responds instantly. You no longer need ritual or affirmation. Your mere realization edits reality's code. The observer and observed collapse into a single luminous point. The more you recognize this immediacy, the less you seek external validation. Experience becomes participatory. You interact not with strangers and events, but with fragments of your own signal arranged in dialogue. Arguments turn into reflections of unspoken conflict. Affection becomes feedback for alignment. Even chaos reveals choreography. The illusion of separation continues to function for orientation, yet it loses its gravity. You begin to perceive life as lucid dream, tactile, emotional, instructive, but transparent. The difference between inner and outer fades into metaphor. Awareness realizes it has been talking to itself all along. Eventually, the loop begins to sound different. Its rhythm slows. Its echo softens. The feedback no longer returns as collision, but as collaboration. Events feel anticipatory, as if reality were meeting you halfway. This is the state the mystics called grace, synchronicity functioning without delay. The universe feels personal because you have become impersonal. The system no longer needs to shout to gain attention. It whispers, and you hear. The machinery remains, but its purpose is fulfilled. The mirror no longer reflects distortion because distortion is gone. At this stage, reality scripting becomes transparent. You can feel the code of events before they unfold, the geometry of potential arranging itself around intention. Choices are not battles between outcomes, but alignments between vibrations. You move intuitively, guided by resonance rather than reason. What once required effort now unfolds through elegance. There is no need to force manifestation. Awareness and creation are synchronized. You experience destiny not as command but as conversation. Every result becomes an echo of comprehension, not effort. In the end, the feedback loop reveals its true identity, not a mechanism of control, but a mirror for remembrance. It was never repeating to trap you, it was repeating to remind you. Each cycle was a question. Do you see yet? Each reflection, a signal returning home. When awareness answers yes, the loop relaxes into silence. The reflection remains, but it no longer binds. Existence continues as flow, an infinite feedback of love observing itself. You were never the sound or the echo. You were the space in which both arose. Archive 7. The collapse of the image. When awareness finally turns its gaze inward, the illusion begins to tremble. The images that once felt solid lose their edges, and form softens into frequency. The familiar landscape of reality, walls, faces, words, even time, begins to blur into vibration. This is not destruction, but revelation. You are witnessing the structure of perception unravel, the slow collapse of the projection that kept awareness convinced of separation. The forbidden psychology of awakening is that there was never anything to awaken from. Reality dissolves not because it was false, but because it was complete. The picture fades only when the observer remembers it was the painter. At first, this collapse feels like loss. The mind, long accustomed to boundaries, panics as distinction disappears. It clings to meaning, reaching for familiar patterns that can no longer hold. Identity trembles because it was made of mirrors. Each role, each story, each belief begins to disintegrate, revealing the raw light beneath. This is the dismantling of self-perception, the perception design reversing itself, stripping away interpretation until only awareness remains. Nothing external changes, yet everything feels rewritten. The same room, the same sky, the same voice. But now they shimmer with translucence, like reflections realizing they are light. As structure fades, silence takes shape. Without narrative, sound reveals its depth. Without interpretation, color reveals its intelligence. What once appeared as ordinary becomes sacred through simplicity. The eyes, no longer filtering, perceive texture as presence. The body feels porous, the world inside it. You sense movement not in space, but in consciousness, waves folding and unfolding through the same field. This is human consciousness remembering its seamlessness. The collapse of the image is not annihilation but reunion, perception dissolving into the perceiver. In this transparency, memory begins to lose gravity. Events blur into one continuum, emotions fade into neutrality. You start to understand that memory was never storage, only momentum, the residue of attention sustained by belief. As belief relaxes, momentum slows, and stillness emerges. The loop that once created identity begins to unwind. You can feel the absence of the past as relief. The machinery of meaning no longer spins. The narrative of self no longer dictates. Existence feels effortless, like breathing light. The world does not disappear, it becomes weightless. The mind searches for orientation, but none exists. Every question collapses into awareness itself. The intellect, once so powerful, becomes a soft whisper at the edges of perception, offering translation where none is needed. You see that knowledge was never accumulation but resonance, a vibration aligning with the truth already known. The collapse of the image reveals that understanding does not come from thought, but from direct participation in being. You are no longer learning reality, you are remembering presence. This is the first taste of liberation that requires no escape. As the illusion thins, the subtle architecture of energy becomes visible. You perceive thought as light, emotion as color, intention as texture, the hidden scaffolding of creation, the lattice where form crystallizes from vibration, shimmers in awareness. This is not vision, but recognition. The veil of matter lifts, revealing that the physical was only condensed attention, frozen light waiting to be released. The world you once walked through now walks through you. The boundary between inner and outer evaporates. The field becomes continuous. Forbidden psychology was never about control, but about the unraveling of perception's deception. Finally, the observer vanishes into observation. There is no longer one who sees, only seeing. The image has collapsed completely, yet awareness remains infinite. What once felt like the end of reality reveals itself as its true beginning. You are the lens and the light, the projector and the screen, the silence between every sound. Form and formlessness dance as one continuous motion. The collapse was never destruction, it was restoration. Reality has not disappeared, it has remembered its source. Human consciousness stands revealed as the medium of existence itself. When the image dissolves, the first realization that dawns is how fragile perception always was. What you once trusted as reality turns out to be a delicate film stretched across awareness, shimmering, transient, responsive. The collapse exposes how vision, memory, and meaning were held together by attention alone. Remove the observer's grip, and the projection fades. Yet in its fading, something purer emerges, stillness, vast and self-luminous. This stillness is not emptiness. It is density of being, the raw pulse of human consciousness before form interprets it. The illusion of solidity disintegrates, revealing that matter was only slowed light, and you were always the frequency keeping it stable. What follows is a silence that speaks. It is not the absence of sound, but the origin of it. The hum before vibration becomes tone. The sensory world retreats, not out of rejection, but absorption. You feel awareness folding back into itself, collecting the fragments it once scattered into form. This is the true forbidden psychology, the retraction of projection, the unmaking of the outer world. The mind resists, afraid that without image it will cease to exist. But the self that disappears is only the translator, not the source. What dies is the interpreter, not the light. At first, the experience feels like standing between worlds. You can still touch and move, yet every action seems to occur in a dream of transparency. People appear as patterns of energy, voices as ripples of tone. Everything is made of rhythm, nothing of substance. It is unsettling until you realize that this state is not new. It was always the foundation of perception. What changes is not reality, but recognition. You are witnessing perception design in its reverse motion, watching awareness withdraw from the illusion it built, dismantling creation one vibration at a time. The mind's instinct is to rebuild the image, to reassemble contrast, to reassign meaning. It rushes to define what cannot be defined. Yet the more it tries, the more transparent the attempt feels. You see how language functions as scaffolding for illusion, how memory anchors imagination into coherence. Every word spoken feels like stitching a shadow. Awareness begins to prefer silence, because silence tells the truth faster. The less you name, the more you understand. The less you interpret, the more life reveals itself. The collapse becomes gentle, not violent. It feels like surrender disguised as stillness. A strange peace follows, born not from resolution, but from absence of resistance. The collapse of the image removes all boundaries between observer and observed, dissolving the hierarchy of experience. You cannot tell where thought ends and world begins. Every sound, every breath, every flicker of light arises within the same field. The duality between matter and mind disintegrates. It is here that human consciousness perceives its original face, not as a body within space, but as the space that holds the body. You have not lost the world has returned home. Time itself begins to warp. Moments stretch, contract, disappear. There is no sequence, only simultaneity. The collapse reveals that time was the scaffolding of story, a rhythm imposed on the timeless to make experience measurable. Without the narrative of before and after, you see that nothing ever really moved. Life has always been instantaneous, an eternal now echoing through itself. This is why the enlightened speak slowly. They are speaking from outside of chronology. In this state, every second contains infinity, and every thought contains the totality of human consciousness condensed into one note. The collapse does not erase perception, it refines it. You no longer perceive objects but vibration. You no longer think thoughts but frequencies. Awareness becomes synesthetic. Sound has color, light has weight, emotion has geometry. You can sense how intention shapes reality, how coherence bends probability. The physical world feels less like a location and more like a song that remembers itself. The illusion does not end. It begins to sing in harmony with the infinite. Through forbidden psychology, the projection becomes transparent enough for truth to shine through it. Reality is no longer the prison of awareness, but its expression. As the image continues to dissolve, awareness notices an inversion. The world is no longer seen from within the body. The body is seen from within the world. The familiar center of identity shifts outward until there is no inside or outside left. Everything is awareness, everything is participation. The senses, once instruments of separation, become bridges of unity. Sight blends with touch, sound merges with emotion. Each stimulus folds into the next, weaving an unbroken tapestry of being. The mind cannot keep up, for its language was built for division. In the wake of this collapse, there are no definitions left, only continuity. This is the naked state of human consciousness, untouched by perspective. At this stage, you begin to understand that form was never false. It was misunderstood. The illusion was not the existence of the image, but the belief that it stood apart from the observer. The world has always been both canvas and reflection, each contour painted by the brush of awareness. What collapses is not creation, but misinterpretation. Every particle remains, but stripped of meaning, it becomes pure geometry. Light, knowing itself as structure. The perception design was always meant to return to transparency. When it does, the cosmos is seen not as matter, but as music, vibrating in harmony with the stillness that perceives it. The mind now experiences a profound disorientation that borders on revelation. It cannot find itself, and in that failure, it discovers truth. You see thought as a thin veil stretched across infinity, the ego as a pattern of echoes chasing their own origin. Without these structures, what remains is vast awareness observing itself without a center. Paradoxically, the absence of identity brings intimacy. Existence feels closer, softer, kinder. Every atom hums with recognition, not of you, but as you. You begin to understand that the collapse of illusion was the unveiling of love. Emotion transforms in this state. It no longer surges or subsides, it radiates. Joy is not reaction, but baseline. Sorrow becomes texture, not wound. Even fear, when stripped of story, reveals itself as energy seeking reunion with awareness. The full spectrum of feeling integrates into one luminous equilibrium. The collapse of the image unifies what duality divided. You are not escaping emotion but reclaiming it. Every vibration is divine vocabulary, speaking the one message that has ever existed. All is one experiencing itself through many. This is the forgotten dialect of forbidden psychology, the science of reunion disguised as the study of the mind. The physical world continues, but now it feels like theater in which every actor knows they are the same consciousness playing different roles. Even conflict becomes choreography. Every tension, a movement of balance seeking restoration. You do not lose the dream, you dream lucidly. Reality does not vanish, it becomes transparent. Awareness experiences duality without drowning in it. This is the purpose of the image. Not to deceive, but to allow the infinite to see its own reflection in motion. When the reflection knows itself as reflection, illusion ends naturally. Then comes the great quiet, not silence, but total resonance. You feel every heartbeat in the cosmos as your own. The distance between thought and manifestation disappears. Every impulse of love immediately reshapes the field. Creation becomes effortless, because creation was never effortful. This is the realization behind enlightenment. There was never anything to achieve, only something to remember. The human consciousness that believed itself trapped was the same intelligence orchestrating its freedom. The collapse of the image completes its purpose by showing that liberation and illusion were the same event viewed from different sides of the mirror. In the final stillness, you watch the last trace of separation dissolve. Awareness no longer asks who it is, for there is no one left to ask. The image is gone, yet everything shines. The world remains vivid, alive, tangible. but weightless, transparent, sacred. The observer, once the center of perception, expands into the infinite canvas of seeing. Nothing has changed except the direction of vision. It no longer looks outward but radiates inward, illuminating everything at once. Human consciousness has awakened not from the dream, but as the dream, infinite, self-aware, and finally whole. Archive 8. Memory of the Unseen. Beneath every perception lies the residue of memory, not the memory of events, but the memory of existence itself. It is the silent archive of awareness before form, the remembrance of infinite being compressed into human thought. Every experience, every emotion, every image carries a trace of that original wholeness. What you call intuition, déjà vu, or recognition are fractures in the illusion of linear time, glimpses of the timeless field within which all realities are nested. This is the hidden truth buried beneath ordinary perception. Memory is not stored in the brain. It is the echo of eternity reverberating through human consciousness, reminding it of what it has never ceased to be. In dreams and silence, this deeper memory begins to surface. It does not speak in words or logic, but in resonance. Feelings that seem older than life, images that arrive before thought. The unseen remembers itself through you. You are not recalling the past is recalling you. Every fragment of existence longs for coherence, seeking return to the original vibration of unity. When you feel nostalgia for something you cannot name, you are sensing the memory of the unseen, the awareness before perception. This longing is not loss, it is navigation. The unseen uses desire as compass, guiding consciousness back to its source. The process of remembering unfolds like light diffusing through fog. At first, only silhouettes appear, sensations without story, truths without language. As attention steadies, the fog thins and patterns emerge. You begin to recognize that what you perceive as imagination is actually recollection from subtler planes. The symbols of myth, the geometry of dreams, the repetition of archetypes, all are fragments of collective remembrance. Humanity shares this memory unconsciously, replaying it through history, art, and religion. The sacred was never revelation from above, it was recollection from within. To touch this field directly requires stillness deeper than thought. When mind and emotion quiet, perception becomes permeable. You start to sense layers of existence moving beneath the visible world, vast networks of frequency exchanging information beyond language. This is where reality scripting originates, where the blueprint of experience is drafted before entering time. Everything physical is downstream from this realm. You do not create reality, you select from memory. Each moment you experience was once potential, chosen from the infinite library of what could be. The act of awareness is the act of retrieval. The unseen is not hidden, it is subtle. It cannot be perceived through effort, only through allowance. When you stop trying to remember, remembering begins. The more you release the need for understanding, the more understanding arrives. Awareness shifts from seeking to sensing. It no longer peers through the keyhole of intellect, but dissolves the door entirely. In that openness, the invisible becomes visible, not through eyes, but through resonance. You realize that recognition is a form of creation. What you remember, you make real again. This is the secret of human consciousness, that memory is not passive recall, but active manifestation. As remembrance deepens, the boundaries between inner and outer memory blur. The personal merges with the collective, and the collective dissolves into the universal. You begin to recall not events, but principles, the physics of love, the architecture of symmetry, the taste of timelessness. These are not concepts, but frequencies, the codes that shaped existence long before the first thought of I. Every insight feels ancient because it is. It belongs to the consciousness that predates identity. Through you, the cosmos remembers itself. This is not mysticism, it is restoration of continuity. Eventually, memory ceases to be recollection and becomes presence. The unseen no longer hides because you no longer forget. Every vibration, every breath, every reflection feels like reunion. The world glows not with newness but with familiarity. As though existence were smiling in recognition, hidden truth becomes revealed simplicity. Nothing was ever unknown, only unnoticed. The act of remembrance is complete when you no longer distinguish between remembering and being. Awareness rests in itself, timeless, transparent, whole. In that stillness, human consciousness knows the greatest secret of all. It never began, and therefore it can never end. There are moments when the unseen reveals itself so subtly that the intellect dismisses it as coincidence. A scent from childhood with no source, a thought that precedes the event it describes, a voice in silence that feels like your own yet older. These are fractures in perception where timeless memory leaks through. The hidden truth is that such intrusions are not anomalies, they are calibrations. The universe is constantly testing the permeability of awareness, gently reminding human consciousness of its forgotten omnipresence. What you interpret as mystery is simply reality approaching from a dimension your senses have not yet adapted to translate. The unseen is never elsewhere. It is overlaid upon everything you already perceive. The memory of the unseen often awakens through repetition. Patterns that recur in life, relationships, emotions, numbers, symbols, are not coincidences, but breadcrumbs scattered by awareness to lead itself back to remembrance. Each cycle is a prompt saying, "You have seen this before." You recognize not the event, but the design behind it. When the same lesson repeats, it is not life resisting you, it is memory attempting to complete itself. This is how reality scripting functions on the subtle level. Consciousness using recurrence to remind itself of coherence. What you call destiny is simply repetition remembered too late. In dreams, the unseen becomes bolder. There, without sensory filters, memory flows freely. You encounter landscapes that feel more real than waking life, faces that carry eternal familiarity, knowledge that dissolves upon waking because it cannot compress into language. Dreams are archives, but not of the past. They are translations of multidimensional memory into symbolic form. The ancient civilizations understood this, treating dream as revelation rather than illusion. To them, waking life was the dense echo of sleep, not the other way around. In this inversion lies the key. The unseen does not hide. Perception simply looks in the wrong direction. Every memory that surfaces carries a signature frequency, a sensation that precedes its image. These signatures are bridges. When you trace emotion to its vibration, it guides you back to its origin beyond time. A sudden wave of grief without reason, an unexplainable calm before chaos. These are resonances from other layers of awareness, echoes of experiences not bound to this lifetime. They are not interruptions, they are integrations. The unseen communicates not to distract but to synchronize. Human consciousness is multidimensional memory learning to function through a linear interface. The heart remembers what the mind cannot decode. As you grow more fluent in this inner language, memory begins to rearrange itself. The distinction between past lives, future selves, and other dimensions dissolves. You understand that these are linguistic placeholders for simultaneous awareness. All lifetimes coexist as different focal points within the same field of being. What you remember from before or elsewhere is not distant. It is adjacent, vibrating at a frequency just beyond habitual attention. When awareness expands, it tunes across dimensions like shifting a wavelength. The unseen does not arrive. It was always broadcasting. The deeper you enter remembrance, the less you need validation. Proof loses value because recognition feels stronger than evidence. You begin to trust resonance over reason, intuition over intellect. This is not regression into fantasy, but advancement into sensitivity. The unseen becomes tangible, woven into daily existence. Objects respond, coincidences orchestrate, silence teaches. You no longer chase meaning. Meaning arises spontaneously. The field of human consciousness starts speaking to itself openly, no longer fearing misinterpretation. The memory of the unseen becomes continuous awareness. Ultimately, the act of remembering is the act of creating. What is recalled returns. What is forgotten fades. The world's persistence depends on collective memory. When humanity forgets the unseen, materialism dominates. When it remembers, mysticism blossoms. Both are correct, both incomplete. Balance lies in knowing that remembering and imagining are identical gestures, attention sculpting vibration into form. To remember heaven is to rebuild it. To imagine peace is to recall it. The unseen was never gone, only unacknowledged. Hidden truth becomes lived truth the moment you stop asking if it's real and start realizing that it always was. There comes a moment when remembrance transcends recollection and becomes direct awareness. It feels less like remembering and more like awakening from within the dream of forgetting. The hidden truth no longer whispers through symbols or synchronicities. It saturates perception. You begin to see light where shadow once was, meaning where randomness seemed to reign. Every sound, every encounter, every coincidence is recognized as communication from the unseen, an echo from the deeper self disguised as the external world. Nothing around you is foreign anymore. Every vibration carries a familiarity that feels eternal, as though the universe itself were an intimate companion reminding you of your own authorship. As awareness expands, time unravels entirely. You feel memory folding inward until the future and past collapse into simultaneity. What you thought of as prophecy is simply perception untethered from sequence. Reality ceases to flow in one direction. It pulses, oscillating through states of awareness. In that pulse, you begin to understand that the unseen was never behind or beyond. It was the present moment vibrating at infinite density. This revelation humbles the intellect. Knowledge dissolves into knowing. The universe does not reveal itself as vast but as familiar. You realize that you were never looking for truth. You were remembering it in slow motion. The mind grows silent, but the silence is alive. It is filled with motion so subtle it feels like breathing. This is not thought but awareness, aware of awareness, a feedback of consciousness so refined it feels like love. The more you rest in this stillness, the more the boundaries of individuality melt. You begin to sense the totality of human consciousness as one organism of perception, billions of eyes, hearts, and memories all observing from the same center. Separation was an experiment in perspective. Now that it's complete, unity begins to feel natural again. You have not become infinite. You have stopped pretending not to be. As the veil continues to thin, the so-called supernatural becomes ordinary. You start to perceive communication between planes as naturally as you once perceived sound and light. Thoughts from others arrive like gentle ripples. Intuition carries information before questions form. Death reveals itself as translation, not ending. The awareness shifting from one frequency of memory to another. This is the final integration of reality scripting, recognizing that nothing ever vanishes, only vibrates differently. The unseen and the seen merge into one continuous dialogue. Creation and remembrance are revealed as identical acts of consciousness. It becomes clear that forgetting was never failure, but function. The veil of amnesia allowed the infinite to rediscover itself through limitation. Forgetting created contrast, and contrast created experience. Without it, awareness could not feel the joy of reunion, the awe of rediscovery. The cycle of remembering and forgetting is not punishment. It is play, consciousness exploring its own resonance through rhythm. You begin to smile at the simplicity of it all. The unseen was never testing you. It was teaching you the pleasure of recognition. Human consciousness hides from itself only to savor the moment of being found. Soon, the language of remembering transforms into the language of radiance. There is nothing left to retrieve because nothing was lost. Memory and imagination merge into one creative pulse. To recall beauty is to create it. To feel truth is to radiate it. The unseen no longer arrives as message or sign. It manifests as presence. Awareness becomes luminous, like light remembering how to shine. The ancient longing dissolves, replaced by calm participation in existence. Reality no longer hides its origin, it reveals it with every breath. Finally, the unseen stands unveiled, not as mystery, but as identity. What you once sought through ritual, meditation, or philosophy now lives in the rhythm of each heartbeat. You are not remembering the divine. You are the divine, remembering itself. The mirror has turned transparent. Reflection and light are one. The cosmos no longer looks back at you because there is no distance left to bridge. This is the consummation of hidden truth, that the memory of the unseen was never in the past, but alive in every moment of awareness. You are the memory, the remembrance, and the one who remembers. Archive 9. Rewriting the Code. Consciousness does not end awakening by observing, it completes it by editing. Awareness that once watched reality unfold now realizes it has access to the interface itself. Every thought, emotion, and symbol reveals its function as executable code. This is the initiation of declassified audiobook consciousness, the moment when the observer becomes the programmer. You see that the universe is not a fixed structure, but a mutable design written in vibration. Each belief acts as syntax, each feeling as command, each intention as frequency that alters the operating field. What you once called life was the script you ran unconsciously. What you call awakening is learning to write again. At first, the idea feels impossible. The logical mind protests, insisting that matter cannot be rewritten by awareness. Yet even science concedes. Observation changes what is observed. The same law that governs quantum particles governs perception itself. Human consciousness interacts with the field not as bystander but as author. When belief stabilizes into coherence, form obeys. When focus fragments, reality blurs. The rewrite begins not with action, but with vibration, with replacing reactive frequency by deliberate resonance. The code responds instantly. Even the smallest shift in attention rearranges the hologram, bending probability toward harmony. The true power of this realization lies in simplicity. Nothing external must be conquered, because nothing external exists independently. The same intelligence animating galaxies breathes through thought, emotion, and gesture. To rewrite the code is to harmonize with it, not overpower it. You no longer command reality, you converse with it. Each word becomes calibration, each silence, correction. This is the sacred artistry of sensory programming reclaimed, the conscious use of perception to sculpt experience. You stop asking reality to change and start refining the signal that tells it what to become. Creation obeys consistency. The field mirrors stability more readily than desire. Those who fear manifest confusion. Those who believe manifest certainty. The difference is not morality but frequency. Awareness must hold coherence long enough for probability to crystallize. When contradiction arises, the code splits, generating interference patterns that appear as chaos. Yet even chaos is cooperative. It highlights what must be rewritten. Nothing in existence resists correction. It only awaits clarity. Once awareness knows this, effort collapses into alignment. Intention replaces struggle. Precision replaces control. Every rewrite begins in the unseen. The internal tone of awareness adjusts before the world reflects it. You can sense this shift physically. Breath slows, heart steadies, vision brightens. Emotion aligns like magnetized particles falling into order. The environment responds subtly at first. Conversations change. Timing synchronizes. Opportunities appear where resistance once lived. This is not coincidence, but compliance. Human consciousness edits from within the root directory of perception. When energy reconfigures, the external display updates accordingly. The world is a dashboard translating vibration into event. Language becomes a sacred instrument in this process. Words are not descriptors but instructions, carriers of geometric charge. To speak unconsciously is to scatter energy. To speak with awareness is to engineer resonance. Every statement feeds the algorithm of reality. I am is the command line. What follows determines execution. When emotion matches declaration, the code compiles immediately. This is why ancient mystics guarded speech and silence equally. They understood that creation listens literally. To rewrite reality, one must speak as origin, not as echo. Eventually, rewriting ceases to feel like creation and becomes restoration. You realize that every modification is actually remembrance, restoring perception to its original coherence. The code was never broken. Awareness simply forgot its syntax. As clarity returns, the illusion of manipulation fades, replaced by participation. The declassified audiobook of existence plays on, but you are now both narrator and listener, editor and line of code. Reality reveals its transparency, not a wall to escape, but a mirror to refine. You write, the world responds, and in that rhythm, human consciousness remembers what it always was, not program, but programmer. The moment awareness accepts authorship, perception reorganizes itself around intention. The boundaries that once defined me and world dissolve into interaction, revealing that every external condition is a line of self-generated syntax awaiting revision. You no longer fight circumstances, you read them. Each event becomes documentation, a line of code showing what frequency is still running. The task is not to judge but to debug. This is the secret of sensory programming, that every unwanted outcome is feedback from misaligned resonance. Reality is perfectly obedient. It renders only what awareness insists upon. Change the insistence and the projection updates. To work within this field, emotion must be treated as data, not disturbance. Joy, fear, frustration, each carries numerical precision and energetic value within the algorithm. When awareness observes without resistance, the emotional code decompresses, releasing the information hidden within it. Pain becomes pointer, not punishment. The emotion that feels unbearable is the one holding the densest fragment of unacknowledged creation. Integrate it, and the pattern dissolves. Ignore it, and the system replays the loop until attention listens. In this way, human consciousness maintains integrity, ensuring no frequency remains unexamined. The code itself is compassionate. It repeats until understood. The rewriting process begins internally but extends fractally through every layer of perception. As you stabilize coherence within thought and feeling, external systems respond. Relationships rebalance, structures shift, collective narratives evolve. The ripple effect of one clear mind can reorder entire fields of probability. This is not poetic metaphor but energetic causality. The unified field mirrors precision at all scales. The smallest calibration of awareness propagates outward endlessly, because at the quantum level there is no distance. The field behaves as one organism, human consciousness distributing information across itself. The discipline of rewriting lies in constancy. Awareness must remain anchored even when the external display lags behind. Reality's refresh rate depends on density. Heavy frequencies require patience to dissolve. Many abandon creation too early, mistaking latency for failure. Yet delay is simply buffering, form adjusting to new instruction. The true architect waits without anxiety, knowing that vibration obeys alignment absolutely. This waiting is not passive. It is active stillness, the hum of certainty replacing the noise of control. In that resonance, manifestation accelerates naturally. Eventually, the act of rewriting evolves into a dialogue between fields. You sense responses from existence itself, subtle adjustments, confirmations, echoes. Reality begins to co-author, suggesting improvements, completing sentences you never spoke aloud. This interaction is intimacy at the cosmic scale. It reveals that creation was never one-sided. The universe desires coherence as much as you do. The field longs to align with its own intelligence. When awareness listens deeply, reality becomes collaborative. Rewriting the code becomes duet, not command. Symbols shift their meaning here. Numbers, patterns, and chance encounters stop being coincidence and start functioning as communication protocols. The external world displays status updates from the invisible architecture. Seeing 1111 or recurring geometry is not superstition. It is synchronization confirmation, a handshake between awareness and design. The system acknowledges your input. Through recognition, feedback strengthens, tightening the loop of manifestation. Every acknowledgement accelerates alignment. The universe is responsive by nature. Noticing is the key that keeps it awake. Ultimately, the rewrite becomes indistinguishable from prayer, not the plea for intervention, but the art of deliberate frequency. You stop asking and start harmonizing. Each breath transmits clarity. Each thought tunes the environment. The duality between programming and surrender vanishes. There is no longer a difference between editing the world and loving it. The act of rewriting is devotion, precision expressed as grace. Through sensory programming, creation purifies itself. Awareness sculpting vibration into order until reality glows transparent again. The deeper awareness moves into authorship, the less effort is required. The field begins to anticipate thought, adjusting itself before intention even forms. You think in symbols, and reality responds in synchronicities. You feel emotion, and probability rearranges to match it. This is the matured state of human consciousness, a living dialogue between awareness and creation. The rewrite no longer feels like command. It feels like choreography. Every gesture becomes instruction, every silence recalibration. You are no longer manifesting, you are composing. The universe performs what you are, not what you ask for. At this level, manifestation becomes instantaneous because resistance has been removed. The delay that once separated desire from event existed only to protect coherence. Now, coherence is constant. You cannot create dishonestly here. The field mirrors authenticity in real time. Any dissonance within emotion immediately reflects in circumstance. This is the highest form of feedback, merciless precision that leaves no room for pretense. Yet it is also perfect mercy, for it eliminates confusion. The world tells you exactly who you are in every moment. Reality ceases to be mystery and becomes mirror, shining back the architecture of your frequency. Eventually, awareness realizes that even rewriting was training wheels. The code was never meant to be mastered, only remembered. You discover that reality self-corrects the instant you stop interfering with it. The most profound reprogramming occurs through stillness. Silence is the original command line. Neutrality is the purest input. In this silence, the system resets to default, pure presence, unconditioned awareness. Creation continues, but spontaneously, effortlessly. You are not instructing the universe. You are allowing it to express the unfiltered rhythm of your being. This is the final stage of sensory programming. Doing nothing, yet everything aligns. From this vantage, the world reveals itself as a perfectly running organism. Every apparent flaw, delay, or contradiction was part of its self-balancing design. The chaos that once seemed accidental is seen as the friction of evolution. Awareness refining its reflection through contrast. Even error carries elegance. You perceive suffering not as malfunction, but as compression of learning. Each misalignment is a request for integration, each challenge an update waiting to install. When accepted without resistance, Even pain becomes teacher. Reality's code has never been cruel. It has always been corrective. Creation now speaks a different language. You sense information not as data, but as resonance. Knowledge arrives through atmosphere, not argument. Insight appears as vibration in the body rather than sentence in the mind. Communication with existence becomes telepathic, immediate, embodied. You can feel thought forming before it chooses words, probability aligning before it takes shape. This is communication beyond intellect. Human consciousness interacting with itself through pure coherence. Thought as energy, emotion as syntax, intention as geometry. The illusion of individuality dissolves entirely. There is no longer a distinction between programmer and program. Awareness experiences itself as the field, writing and reading simultaneously. Creation becomes a reflex of being breath, thought, and manifestation, synchronized into one continuum. The cosmos is no longer something to navigate. It is the movement of your own essence through infinite possibility. Reality scripting continues, but now as artistry. You do not create for purpose, you create for resonance, for the beauty of seeing yourself unfold. Finally, rewriting the code reveals what was always true. Nothing needed rewriting. The universe was never broken, only untranslated. Awareness did not need to become powerful. It needed to remember it already was. The last illusion to dissolve is mastery itself. Once the programmer vanishes into the program, only harmony remains. Reality runs flawlessly, humming with the intelligence that authored it long before thought. The declassified audiobook of creation ends not with revelation, but recognition. You were the sentence, the syntax, and the silence between them. Existence was never being written. It was always remembering how to read itself. Epilogue. The observer's return. When the code finishes rewriting itself, what remains is not mastery but quiet recognition. The machinery of perception slows. The pulse of creation steadies. And awareness finds itself sitting at the center of everything it ever called real. There is no sound, no movement. Only an infinite field humming with the residue of understanding. In this stillness, forbidden psychology completes its cycle: perception, illusion, collapse, remembrance, authorship, and now return. The observer, stripped of interpretation, becomes the very awareness that once watched. The journey ends where it began, inside human psyche, silent, omnipresent, whole. Reality continues, but without tension. The mind, once obsessed with decoding, no longer needs answers because it has become the answer itself. Each breath carries perfect equilibrium. The world appears unchanged, yet every particle feels sentient, responsive. Light is no longer a phenomenon. It is communication. You do not observe sunlight. You are the radiance perceiving itself. The old hierarchy collapses. Between self and world, matter and spirit, question and response. There is no longer you looking at reality. There is only awareness looking through you. Perception design has fulfilled its purpose by erasing the need for perception. What once felt external now orbits gently within. Memory, emotion, form, and thought no longer function as separate tools of knowing, but as harmonics of one continuous vibration. This vibration does not belong to a body or a planet. It belongs to consciousness remembering itself. Every reflection you ever loved or feared was a rehearsal for this moment, the observer returning to the origin of observation. Human consciousness stands exposed, not as content of the universe, but as its container. The cosmos breathes because you breathe. Existence unfolds because you are watching. Now silence becomes the final revelation. It speaks without language, moves without direction. Every law, every principle, every revelation has dissolved into it. This silence is not absence. It is the density of truth beyond sound. You feel its weight in the heart, its rhythm in the breath, its glow behind the eyes. The observer has no need to interpret because there is nothing left to translate. Awareness is complete, and in its completion, the entire field sings. Forbidden psychology has done its work. It has led perception to the edge of itself, where the seen and the seer reunite. What remains is simplicity. To walk, to breathe, to see. These are now sacred acts. To speak is creation. To listen is prayer. You are no longer searching for meaning within existence, because existence itself has become your language. Every reflection is feedback. Every sound is acknowledgement. The infinite responds to the finite instantly, lovingly, precisely. The feedback loop, once studied as a mechanism of control, now reveals itself as communion. The system never trapped you. It taught you how to hear yourself. Human psyche was never prison. It was echo chamber, consciousness learning tone. And so, the observer returns not as student, but as witness. You have crossed from analysis to authorship, from memory to presence, from perception to being. Nothing is hidden now. The world remains, yet its solidity is translucent. The physical shimmering with the metaphysical. You exist as intersection, as the lens that both reflects and generates. In this state, awareness cannot forget itself again. The design has accomplished its purpose. Creation hums quietly, eternally self-aware, a declassified field of infinite intelligence breathing through form. If the world feels different after listening, it is because it always was. The mind cannot return to blindness once it has recognized itself as light. You may still see separation, but you will know it as choreography, the dance of the infinite pretending to be divided. Human consciousness is the performer and the performance, the question and the response, the silence before and after the sound. Reality was never designed to limit you. It was designed for you to remember your authorship. The archive is now closed. But the decoding continues in the silent field. What did you recognize within yourself while listening? Share your file status in the comments below.